You're going to get top marks writing about Eric by considering the thesis statement. What is it we want to argue that Eric represents? So obviously he represents the younger generation and the hope for the future at the end of the play. A hope which I'm going to show you gets dashed. He also represents the role of men. This is a patriarchal society in which men ruin the lives of women. Not just Eva, but Sheila's life is obviously ruined, and so is her mother's. You'll find out how in the video. And Eric, I'm going to argue, is the worst male of the lot. We're looking at this as an anti-war play. So it's set in 1912, just before the 1914 World War I, and people like Eric, rich, educated young men who were still young enough to go to war, were the ones most likely to be killed because they are the officer class, the people who would have been first over the top in the trenches and therefore most easy to shoot. And they would also have been the main targets of German gunners because they were the officers. Now that's important to Priestley because Eric's father, representing that generation of rich capitalists, were happy to sacrifice their own children in order for greater profit. Now that is important because those same people have led the country into World War II in 1939, because An Inspector Calls is an anti-war play. Let's dive into the quotations about Eric. The first one-word quotation is that Eric is squiffy. This is important for a number of reasons. First, it is a euphemism for alcoholic. It makes his alcoholism easier to accept. Now that is going to be super important at the end of the play because Eric is going to go on a character arc, a journey where he shows that he has learned the inspector's lesson. But he has learned that lesson while being drunk. Priestley is planting the seed here that maybe Eric doesn't actually really and truly learn the inspector's lesson. He's only receptive when he's drunk, but when he metaphorically sobers up in the morning, that lesson will be cast aside. However, Priestley also gives Eric the socialist views in the play. He points out that women like Eva can't go and work somewhere else. The reason that's so important is that it is illegal to operate a cartel. A cartel is where businesses get together. The people working at their businesses haven't got the opportunity to go and work for the other business because they will be paid the same artificially low wage. That is supposed to be anti-capitalist. In a pure capitalist system, what should happen is that I am an employer, I need good workers, I can't find good workers, so I pay them more, and therefore good workers get a fair wage. Well, that's what Eric is arguing for. He says we should be morally good capitalists. But Burling and Crofts are not morally good. In fact, they are operating something illegal, the cartel. They are the first criminals in the play. We're conditioned to see Eric as the main criminal because he's the one who's going to steal about £50 from his father's business. But he's not. Gerald and Burling are much bigger criminals because they are robbing their employees of a fair wage by colluding on how much they pay the employees. And because their businesses are so massive, there aren't many other jobs in the town compared to the jobs in the factories. That's what Eric means. Now, he also gives us the other quote, which gives us a moral sense of what capitalism could be. We try for the highest prices, he said. Why shouldn't they try for the highest wages? Now, that is how capitalism should work. That's why Priestley is a socialist. And it appears that Eric is also a socialist. But remember, he's also drunk. So perhaps Priestley is suggesting that it's really difficult for the ruling classes to change. So their sense of moral integrity, a socialist perspective in life, comes into conflict with the views of their parents, who after all hold the purse strings and control how much wealth Eric can have. And therefore, this collision between what he really believes and his parents' beliefs cause him to drink too much, to become an alcoholic. There is also a sense of moral weakness in Eric because he doesn't have to work for his father's business. He's had a varsity education, so he's been to Oxford or Cambridge. He's highly qualified. He could go out and earn money in another business. Another possibility which we'll come to is that his alcoholism is caused by guilt. So he has forced himself sexually upon Eva at a time when it's been impossible for her to resist his advances. He says, I was in that state where a chap easily turns nasty. Notice how he displaces responsibility. He calls himself a chap, as though all chaps are like this. Now this, of course, is Priestley's social and political point. He's saying that all men are potentially likely to abuse their power. Eric has the power of wealth, and that contrasts with Eva's incredible lack of wealth. At this stage, she's very likely turned to prostitution because she's no other way of earning money, and therefore she has to put up with sexual exploitation, sexual violence. So it's strongly hinted at by Eric that this is what he's done. But he doesn't want to take responsibility for that. He wants to deny it. So he says, well, I was drunk. I can't really remember what happened. This is just what chaps do. And he says, it seems I was in that state. He's not being definite about anything because he wants to avoid responsibility. And that avoidance is probably what's also led to his alcoholic state. He doesn't really believe his own excuses, and so he's trying to drink away the memory of what he's done so he can avoid the responsibility and facing up to it. He won't even name the sexual act. He says, and that's when it happened. Total abdication of responsibility. Eric also uses a lot of the same language as Gerald. So he says, I happened to see her again at the Palace Bar. Now we know that the Palace Bar is where these rich young men and older men go to find prostitutes. Gerald says he hates these hard-eyed, dough-faced women. And Eric says, I hate these fat old tarts, mimicking Gerald's language because he mimics Gerald's attitude. Priestley's making the point that this is what rich men are like. But really the wider point is that they don't respect women. They see women as commodities, property. So you pay for that woman, you rent her, that's the prostitution element. And then when you marry a woman, it's an exchange of your wealth and status for their subservience to you in marriage. That's what's happened to Sybil Burling. Remember, she says to Sheila that men of business are often away when Sheila's bringing up the possibility that Gerald has had an affair. Sybil knows that's what's going on, but she's saying you'll have to put up with it just as I had to. In other words, the role of women in this society that Priestley is presenting us is to be subservient to men even when they're being deceived by them because they're unfaithful. So we can clearly see that Eric is in the habit of going to the Palace Bar. Once he's got Eva pregnant, however, he takes stock of his life and decides he needs to help her. Now, Eric clearly would earn enough to support somebody who is that poor. But instead of using his money to help her, he steals from his father's business. He says it's about £50 all told. Now, £50 doesn't sound a lot to us, but we know that Eva was only earning about 25 shillings. So we can see that £50 is quite a few months' wages. He's been with Eva far less than 6 months. So this begs the question, is Eric stealing the money and keeping loads for himself in order to be spending it all on alcohol, using other prostitutes, whatever it is, gambling? We've no idea. But to Priestley's audience, £50 would have been an alarm bell because they would instantly know that was far more money than Sheila would have been able to use in the time period. So it's very, very clear to them that Eric is lying to himself. He's telling himself that he's stolen the money for her, but how much he's actually given her, we don't know. We do know it's not enough because she has to go to Mrs. Burling's charity. So he's a dishonest character, and he's not deliberately lying to us. He's lying to himself. And that, of course, makes his eventual change to follow the inspector's teaching much more problematic. He believes it at the time, but we already know he's in the habit of lying to himself. So this new lesson he has learnt might also prove to be a lie. Priestley reinforces that when the inspector says to him, "You stole the money." And he says, "Not really." This is another lie, isn't it? He's pretending to himself that he will pay the money back, but we don't necessarily believe. Eric is full of righteous anger because Eva, after all, has killed herself and their unborn child. We can clearly see that he does care for this unborn child because he offered to marry Eva and Eva turned him down. So Eric is a man who has a hamartia, if you like, a flaw which is lust, but he doesn't just give in to it. He feels a sense of responsibility for what he's done and he's trying to make amends. Eva still commits suicide, and she does it in a way that tells us how horrible his treatment of her has been, because she doesn't choose a painless method of death. It's quite a violent method of death, to drink detergent. It tells us that she doesn't want this baby. Why not? Because of the way it was conceived. It's the strongest possible hint that this has been a rape and that Eva has been forced to accept it because financially she has no other choice. She can't go to the police and get a prosecution because, well, she's a prostitute. They're not going to pay attention to her. But the male treatment that she's had from Gerald and now Eric has driven her towards death. It is the sexual exploitation that is worse than the financial exploitation. In fact, she's quite happy to do without the money. She tells Eric not to give her any more money because it's been stolen. So we know that it's not finances that drive her to kill herself per se. It's what Eric has done to her. Priestley is using this symbolically. He's saying this is typical of the way capitalist men treat women. And Eric is then just an extreme example. But he's not that extreme, is he? The unusual thing about Eric is that he tries to take responsibility about it. And Priestley's implying there might be thousands or millions of other Erics who just go about their business not feeling guilt at all. So he says to his mother, "You killed her, your own grandchild." This conveys how much he's invested in this child that Eva is going to have. It tells us that he wanted to be a responsible parent, but it also tells us another thing. You killed her, his mother, not me, Eric. He isn't blaming himself for her death. The manner of her suicide strongly suggests it is himself that he should blame, but no, he doesn't want to accept that blame, and so he blames his mother. He tries to get rid of the shame on himself by blaming his parents. "I'm ashamed of you. Yes, both of you." He directs the blame at them, where really most of the blame should be his own. Now, we can sympathise with them here because he's talking about the fact that they refuse to learn the lesson, and we can argue that Eric does learn the lesson. He certainly says all the right things. He certainly understands the inspector's lesson, whereas Burling refuses to learn the inspector's lesson. He thinks that he could pay thousands to bring Eva back, but as he can't, well, he's not going to change his behaviour towards the rest of his workers. And Sybil Burling says, "I'm not ashamed of it. I've done nothing wrong." So Priestley uses this exchange to show the massive division between the two generations. Those in power, the Burlings, and those who want to achieve power, Eric and Sheila, but probably won't. Eric now says, "You lot may be letting yourself off nicely, but I can't, nor can mother. Again, he's linking his own actions to his mother's. Here, he is accepting responsibility. He knows that what he's done isn't excusable. He cannot let himself off. But equally, he can't let his mother off because she didn't give Eva charity. That's important to Priestley because he believes charity should not be in the hands of the rich. It should be state charity. There should be social security, unemployment benefit, housing benefit. There should be a way of helping the poor to stop them becoming destitute and to help them get back into work. Leaving these decisions to the rich simply allows their prejudices to play out, as we see with Sybil Burling. Eric blames Sybil Burling because although he is wealthy, although he comes from a socially superior family, he is against the class system. It gives us a lot of sympathy for Eric because despite what he's done to Eva, he would go back and marry her. That is a massive correction to what he's done. It's an acceptance that not only should he take responsibility, but that the class system is false. He would be, I'm going to use the word happy, but obviously he's not content, but he would be happy to marry someone who is at the very bottom of the social ladder, not even through love, but through responsibility. That is a massive step forward. Perhaps if Eva had survived, Eric would truly have learnt the inspector's lesson and the future might have been different. The ending of the play, though, tells us that the future isn't different. There is a second phone call. Why? Well, symbolically because the Burlings don't accept the lesson, Gerald doesn't accept the lesson, and therefore the balance of probability is that the future will not change. This implies that Sheila won't be able to change the future. She's definitely learned the lesson, but she's a woman and has no power. 1912, she can't even vote. So yeah, you can learn the message, but you're just a woman in this patriarchal society. You're not going to change anything. Eric does have the opportunity to change things, but the First World War is going to come along and very likely kill him. If he survives the First World War, he's not going to learn the lesson because, symbolically, he was drunk when he learnt it. Or he is going to learn the lesson, but he's not going to achieve the power and influence that he wants because, symbolically, the older generation kept that power after the First World War, and that's what led to them marching the country towards a Second World War without thinking about the consequences to their own children and grandchildren who would be killed by it or would suffer greatly as a result of it. So Eric becomes a kind of tragic hero. His own hamartia has caused him to abuse Eva, and his own attempts to try and save Eva have only pushed her more towards her own death. So you do not have to buy my best-selling guide in order to get grade 9. Only 10 quotations will do it. If you'd like to do this with any theme, this is the video to watch next.